Everyone lost their minds the second the White House card was announced, and honestly, the reaction says more about the fans than it does about the event itself. The narrative instantly became that the UFC had fumbled some once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that this was supposed to be the biggest card ever assembled, and instead we got something mid, something that didn't live up to the fantasy matchups people had built in their heads for months. But that's exactly the problem. People weren't reacting to reality, they were reacting to expectations that were never grounded in reality to begin with. For months, people convinced themselves that this card was going to feature Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, Jon Jones returning in some blockbuster heavyweight clash, and somehow Conor McGregor making his grand comeback all on the same night, as if the UFC was just going to stack three of the most complicated, difficult-to-make fights in the sport onto one card because of the location. And when that didn't happen, instead of reassessing whether those expectations were realistic, the reaction was to call the card disappointing. Take the whole Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev situation, because this is where things get really interesting. People are acting like the UFC dropped the ball by not making that fight, but if you actually look at what happened, it paints a very different picture. Topuria accepted the fight immediately. No hesitation, no negotiating games, no delay. He was ready to go. On the other side, Islam reportedly turned it down, citing a hand injury. That's the official explanation. But then, just days later, there's footage of him hitting a heavy bag, throwing punches with that same hand. So it raises a completely fair question. Did Islam actually turn the fight down because of an injury? Was there hesitation about fighting someone like Topuria, who has that kind of knockout power, that kind of pressure, that kind of momentum, because stylistically, that's a dangerous fight. Topuria isn't just another contender, he's the kind of guy who can change a fight with one exchange. And when you're on top, like Islam is, the risk-reward calculation becomes very real. You've got everything to lose and not much to gain in terms of legacy, especially if the narrative is already against you. And if that's the case, then the blame can't be put on the UFC for not making that fight happen. If one side is ready and the other isn't, there's only so much you can do. Then you've got the Jon Jones situation, which is honestly even more frustrating when you look at it from a trust perspective. This is a guy who reportedly turned down $30 million to fight Tom Aspinall. $30 million. That's not a negotiation. That's a statement. And what that statement says is that Jones is operating on his own terms, completely detached from what the division needs or what the promotion is trying to build. And that's his right as a fighter, but it comes with consequences. Because at that point, why would the UFC trust him to anchor something like the White House card? Why would you build around someone who has already shown that he's willing to walk away from massive opportunities if they don't align perfectly with his own plans? From a business standpoint, it makes no sense. You need reliability, you need commitment, and you need fighters who are actually going to show up and compete when the stakes are high. If Jones isn't that guy right now, then it's completely logical for the UFC to move on and build around other names. And yet, fans were convinced he was going to be on the card. And when he wasn't, it somehow became a failure of the event, rather than a reflection of the situation. The same thing goes for Conor McGregor, who somehow gets attached to every major card, regardless of whether there's any real indication that he's actually returning. At this point, it's almost become a tradition. Big event gets announced, Conor gets mentioned, expectations skyrocket, and then when he doesn't show up, people act surprised. But again, that's not on the UFC. That's on the fans for creating a version of reality that doesn't exist. Now, when you actually look at what is on the card, it's not just solid, it's genuinely compelling in ways that people are overlooking because they're too focused on what isn't there. Alex Pereira versus Ciryl Gane, for example, is being massively underrated in terms of what it represents stylistically. This has the potential to be one of the best heavyweight kickboxing matchups we've ever seen in MMA. You're talking about two elite strikers with completely different approaches, both operating at a level where one mistake can end the fight instantly. Pereira brings that terrifying precision and power, the kind that has already translated across multiple weight classes, while Gane offers movement, fluidity, and a technical striking game that's rare for heavyweights. And let's be honest, Pereira might need to bring some protective eyewear into the octagon, because after what we saw with Gane and those wandering fingers against Aspinall, you can't be too careful. You can have the biggest names in the world, but if the fights don't deliver, it doesn't matter. And you can have a card that people initially overlook, only for it to turn into something unforgettable because of how the fights play out. There's another fight that people are completely underestimating in terms of both entertainment and narrative, and that's the main event. People love Gaethje for his toughness, his style, his willingness to go to war, but that exact style is what makes this matchup so dangerous for him. Because if you break it down logically, Topuria is one of the most precise, calculated finishers in the sport right now. He doesn't just swing wildly, he sets traps, he reads reactions, and when he lands clean. Gaethje, on the other hand, thrives in chaos. He's willing to take shots to give shots. He's willing to stand in the pocket and trade. And against most fighters, that works because they can't match his durability or his pressure. But against someone like Topuria, that becomes a massive liability. This isn't one of those fights where you can just say anything can happen and leave it at that. Stylistically, this is about as bad as it gets for Gaethje. However, isn't this one of the thrills of watching combat sports? The possibility of watching the underdog defy all odds and get the victory is a compelling what if. Like when Sean Strickland schooled Adesanya. So when this card finally happens, and people actually sit down and watch it instead of judging it off rumors that were never confirmed, I think a lot of opinions are going to change very quickly. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and stick around, because we're breaking down everything around this card as we get closer to fight night. Thanks for watching. See you next time.